I wonder what he's talking about now, man.
I wonder what he gonna be talking about now.
OG be on it. He got the hot topics. Another hot topic with Shabazz the OG.
Yizzo, what's poppin'? Welcome back to another week of the hot topic with Shabazz the OG. This week, conversation is necessary, but unfortunate at the same time. Conversation surrounding the incident that took place in Frisco, Texas, where 17-year-old student athlete Karmelo Anthony, during an incident, an altercation, took the life of another 17-year-old student athlete, Austin Metcalf. The conversation surrounding this incident has a lot of turbulence and tension because Karmelo is a young black teenager. Austin was a young white teenager. So all the conversation surrounding this ranges from racism to bullying to ineffective parenting, right? These are all the conversations that I've been hearing. Now, I posted about this on my social media because what stood out to me primarily when I read the story, what jumped out at me when I read this was that this incident took less than 30 seconds to occur. Now, anybody that follows me on my social media knows that for the last few months, I've dedicated my social media page to 3 to 30 seconds of thinking. 3 to 30 seconds can change your life from 3 to 30 years. And an abundance of incidents, situations that we see, altercations that we see people find themselves in, from children, young adults to grown adults, comes from a lack of thinking and impulse. So when I read this story, the news article, and it said that this took less than 30 seconds to occur, it just really resonated with me and the message that I'm pushing, right? So the truth is, none of us who are really commentating on this were there. We only speaking from news reports, articles, hearsay, perspective, what someone else said, witness accounts. You know, you draw your best perspective from all that you've heard. I try to approach everything from a space of thinking, unbiasedness. You know, I leave the emotions to the side, try not to allow emotions to come in and supersede my better judgment. And this situation is no different. And because it's so many layers, so many different conversations are being held, and they're all fair, because I don't live in Frisco, but I hear a lot of people speak about that particular area having racial tension. So that's a fair conversation to have. I hear people saying that Austin Metcalf, who was a 17-year-old athlete, linebacker for the football team, pretty athletic, very popular. But again, it said that him and his twin brother, Hunter, were bullies. Again, everything that I'm saying is alleged to be said or alleged to be done. This is all for the sake of conversation and just trying to gather a understanding of how we move forward as a culture, as a society, and as people, right? So this is a conversation. This is not a finger pointing session. This is not what I do. I'm not about problems. I'm about solutions. So the things that I'm saying here now today are strictly based on what's been said and how I'm going to try to share perspective on how those of us who are viewing this, have children, who are active in communities, active on social media, can give input that's going to be sound and valuable to whoever may be observing. So let me get that out the way. This incident is said to have taken place because Karmelo was under the tent of Austin Metcalf and his team. They were at a track meet at the high school. In the bleachers, they set up these tents that go over the actual bleachers. And I'm guessing, according to what was said, and I'm going to tell all the stories that I've heard. I'm just leading with this one. This is not the only story. But one story is that Karmelo was under the tent of the opposing team, uninvited, unwelcomed. Now, I have heard from different sources that sometimes different teams are under the tent of the other team. Whatever the case may be, Austin is supposed to have, alleged to have asked Karmelo to leave from under the tent. And Karmelo refused. And Karmelo responded to something to the degree of, make me leave or make me move. And a verbal exchange took place. And I think something led to Karmelo saying, touch me and see what happens. And then Austin is alleged to have grabbed Karmelo in an attempt to physically make him move. And this is when Karmelo allegedly went into his bag and stabbed Karmelo and stabbed Austin once in the chest. Forgive me for mixing their names up. I'm trying to use their names and because they're humans, so I'm trying to use their names. So it is alleged at that point, Karmelo took out a knife and stabbed Austin once, and he ultimately succumbed to his wound. Right now, back up several paces to the stories where people say that prior to this day, Austin and his brother and others were bullying Karmelo. This is another story, that there was a bullying incident. Karmelo's belongings was taken from him. Something happened relating to his girlfriend. His phone was crushed. These are incidents that took place prior to this incident. So let's just go with the bullying component, that the bullying existed. What it boils down to for me in this incident is both individuals did not exercise critical thinking at any point along the way. Let's go with Austin being a bully. Let's go with that. That behavior, every action has a reaction. That behavior is going to meet some type of circumstance at some point along the way. And I always say this, when you physically oppose other people or you physically violate other people, you never know what the reaction is going to be. And you don't reserve the right to dictate how someone responds to you putting fear into them or to you putting your hands on them. In that incident, let's just go with Karmelo shouldn't have been under the tent. Let's just go with, why was he there? Why was he there if he knew these guys are bullies? Why would he be there with a knife? Let's go with all of those questions. What you can't deny is Austin exuded no authority, zero authority over Karmelo for him to put his hands on him. He had no authority over him to do that. If he asked him to leave and he didn't, and it was that serious for him to leave, this is the time to commission a teacher. That was the time to commission a coach. That was the time to commission an adult. Because once you get physical, you can't dictate what the response to your physicality is going to be. Does that excuse Karmelo's behavior? Absolutely not. Because you're responding to being grabbed by pulling out a weapon and taking somebody's life. That's extreme. So now, the onus upon Karmelo. It's a fair question to say, let's go with these guys were bullies. Let's go with that notion. Why put yourself in a situation to be around someone that you know to be bullies and you have a weapon on you? In a situation that could create hostility, that would cause you to have to defend yourself. That's a fair question. So it's no winners in this, because there's culpability and preventative measures that could have been exercised on both sides. Now let's get to the part about the parenting, because I'm seeing and hearing people challenge Karmelo's parents and his upbringing. I've said this many a times. The best of children, or should I say the best of parenting, sometimes doesn't change what a child or children decide to do in public. So it's not fair to put his parents on trial. It's not fair to question how he was raised unless there's other areas of his behavior that shows he had ineffective parenting. You know, I see other reports of he wasn't supposed to be there that day. He skipped school, so on and so forth. All of these things, all of these different stories very well may be true. But when it all boils down, it comes down to the decision making that took place in the moment of the incident. That's what it comes down to. And that's where we have to place responsibility and onus. Again, if Karmelo had been bullied, it would have been my wish to not put yourself in the space of where the bullies were. Purpose. I would have preferred for him to be somewhere neutral, minding his business, and the bullies approached him and he did what he felt like he needed to do. That would be a different set of circumstances for me. However, even with him being there and placed himself where the bullies were, the bully, the alleged bully, the supposed bully, the probable bully, maybe the bully, all of these words, once his verbal command, we'll call it, was ignored and refused, there was no reason, there was no right to put his hands on him. It doesn't matter who feels what. The facts and the truth are the facts and the truth. He should not have put his hands on him, especially if it's a situation where he's been hurt or harmed or bullied by these kids before. So now let's move over to the racial part of it, because that's a fair conversation when people are saying that this community is known for racism. It's a fair conversation to have. But I'm going to say this when it comes to racism. Racism lives in America. Racism lives in our society. But racism dies in the household. I'm going to repeat that. Racism lives in America. Racism lives in our society. But racism dies in the household. Meaning, if a white kid is born today, 5:32 p.m., and a black kid is born today, 5:32 p.m., and those two kids are put together every day and play with each other, those two kids will not know the difference between black and white. Those two kids are going to know, that's my friend, that's my friend. They're going to start to live life based on what they're taught. And that's where sometimes racism is taught outside of the home, but it's nurtured in the home. So yes, while racism lives in our society, it could die in the home. It could die in the home. So the onus is on you to ask yourself, what am I teaching my child? What am I teaching my children? What's in my household? These are the conversations that people don't want to have. People like having general conversations about society and the world and America. What are you doing in your house? What are you teaching your children? What makes your child thinks that they have the right to tell someone else's child or another human being what to do? And I'm just going to be completely honest about this. We know that in this country, in a lot of situations, in a lot of instances, This is white people's behavior. There is a sense of authority. There is a sense of the need to know. There's a sense of the need to question things and people, and a lot of times where it doesn't even concern them. That behavior is transferred. That behavior is learned. That behavior is exuded and displayed a lot of times by their children and their offspring and their counterparts. There's this sense of authority. That sense of authority could have been displayed that day by Austin. Because the mere fact that if, in fact, he asked Karmelo to move and Karmelo said no, that should have been that. And if the situation was that serious, go get a teacher or an adult. But that sense of privilege and authority that unfortunately a lot of white people carry allowed him to feel in that moment, if you're not going to move, I'm going to make you move. And that decision proved to be fatal, unfortunately. On the flip side, because we know racism exists, us as black people, we have an onus and a protection for ourselves to not put ourselves in certain situations for us to have to prove a point. If I know you're racist, if I know you're trouble, if I know you're a bully, I'm not going to intentionally put myself in a position where I have to have a confrontation with you, where I may have to defend myself to the highest degree. I say this about dealing with the police. Too many people are looking for their moment to have an altercation with the cops so they could say they were mistreated. Well, if you know that you feel like cops are not good people, and you know you feel like cops don't do right by black people, why look for an opportunity to have an altercation with them just so you can have that moment to say they did me wrong? All of us have a responsibility, primarily, first and foremost, to ourselves. We know what this country is that we live in. I don't care about who the president is now, in the future, or before. We know what this country is. I don't think that the country is more racist because Donald Trump is the president. It was racist before he was. Do people feel like, does it appear that people got more wind beneath their wings now? Of course it does. But racism didn't just start. And it can't be ignored, but it can be contained based on what you do in your household. The world is the world, but the world don't control what goes on under your roof and behind your doors. You have an onus to equip your child with your values. So if your child walks out the door with racist values, then you have to ask yourself, was that birthed in my house? Because unless you have a child who does things in the basement or in their room behind closed doors that you don't know about, they've adapted some type of ideologies and practices that you don't know about, that you don't teach, that's something different. But for the most part, what children take out into the world, they developed it and adapted it within their households. So we talk about how bad society is. We talk about how bad the world is. The first place we have to look is in our households and what we're sending out into the world by way of ourselves and our children. Austin Metcalf is gone. And Karmelo Anthony is getting ready to have the fight of his life. And it all took less than 30 seconds to occur, according to the report. But with hindsight being 2020, as clear as it is, I guarantee you we can uncover numerous spaces and spots where this situation could have been avoided. If people knew bullying was occurring, why didn't anybody do anything about it prior to now? Bullying is not a light topic. Children's lives are being taken at the hands of themselves because of bullying. Most kids grew up thinking sticks and stones will break your bones, but names will never hurt me. That's a lie. Words hurt. Words have power. It's not fair to tell somebody, oh, you can't let no words bother you. You're not them. Words have triggers. Words are reminders of traumas. So we may not get the whole truth about what took place under that tent. You're going to get different variations based on who's telling the story. So I'm not here to say this one was more wrong than that one. But me being a grown adult and a free thinker and an honest man, I have enough sense to know that based on all the multitudes of different stories that I've heard, it still brings me back to decision making. It still brings me back to choices. Whether that choice was to be a bully or whether that choice was to put yourself in the presence of a bully because you knew you could protect yourself if the bully decided to bully this day. All of this stuff happened because of choices. Choices that we have to become better at making. Because every action has a reaction. It's extremely important to learn to keep your hands to yourself, whomever you may be, females included. Keep your hands to yourself. Teach your children to keep their hands to themselves. Girls, do not hit boys. Boys, do not hit girls. Teach this to your children. Teach your child that because he's white or she's white, she's not privileged over any other human. Teach your child that. Teach your child that they don't have a right to put their hands on someone because they think they're superior over that person. Because that person may retaliate and harm them. Black parents who live in racially motivated areas and atmospheres, and you're dealing with that. I'm not telling nobody to run. I'm not telling nobody to tuck their tail. I'm not telling nobody not to stand for themselves. But what I am going to say is teach your children not to purposely place themselves in harm's way just because they know if they defend themselves, they'll be right. Because when lives get taken, that changes the trajectory tremendously. Again, I'm not telling nobody to run from nothing. I'm not telling you to avoid being around people who are racist. If that's the atmosphere you're around and you have to be around it, be around it. It is what it is. But we all have gauges and we all know what's necessary and what's not necessary. And if I know that group of people over there is trouble, unless I have to go over there, I'm not going over there. I'm not going to go over there because this is a free country and I got a right to be there if I want to be. You absolutely do. But what comes with that after that? You have just as much right to stand over there as they do. But do you really want to stand over there because that's where you want to be? Or do you want to be over there to exercise your right to be there and then take what comes after that? It's unfortunate that no other people in existence have to go through this but us. But it is what it is. Because white people don't have to really worry about being somewhere where we are. Because we don't really, as a people, for the most part, we don't really bother nobody. For the most part, we're just keeping it a buck. We don't really bother nobody. And the racism and the racial conversation is a little, difficult for many to have, but I don't mind having it because I know how to speak from a neutral place. Because I'm not racist, but I'm a realist. And I just going to say it how it is. And I'm going to leave with this and repeat something that I said a little while ago. Racism lives in our society. Racism lives in America. But it can die in your household based on what you teach your children. And you know what you're teaching your children better than anybody. And that's what the society and the world gets. That's what they get. Whatever you're teaching your child.